Welcome to The American Story. Stories about all the things that make America the country we know and love. It is your generous donations that make the American Story podcast possible. So if you like what we're doing, please take a minute to visit theamericanstorypodcast.org and click Donate. That's theamericanstorypodcast.org and click Donate. We are grateful for your continuing support. This is Chris Flannery with the Claremont Institute. I call this one, Why We Fight. It was just a few weeks after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and American entry into World War II. The most successful film director in America, now Major Frank Capra of the Signal Corps of the United States Army, found himself escorted to the office of Chief of Staff of the Army, General George C. Marshall, deep in the labyrinth of the Pentagon. An appointment to speak alone with the Chief of Staff was, for a military man, tantamount to a private audience with the Pope. Major Capra was lucky to be ignorant of such things. He was already so nervous, he wished he could fly home to his family back in California and hide in their loving warmth. But he couldn't. He was instructed to walk in, not salute, sit down, and say little. He went in, skipped the salute, and sat down. After brief civilities, the general said, "Mr. Capra, you have an opportunity to contribute enormously to your country and the cause of freedom. Are you aware of that, sir?" By the time he could gather composure to speak, all Capra could answer was that it scared the heck out of him. Marshall smiled so disarmingly, Capra thought he could fall in love with him. Then the general spoke for an hour about what he needed Capra to do. He told him that they were raising an army of some 8 million men, that for the most part they would be boys who had never seen a gun. They were going to be uprooted from civilian life and thrown into army camps, and the reason why would not be clear to them. Very quickly, we would have a huge citizen army in which civilians would outnumber professional soldiers by some 50-1. Marshall didn't doubt that our young, freewheeling American boys would be able to endure the hardships and take the iron discipline of war, and that they would prove the equal and the superior to the armies of the tyrannies we were fighting, if they are given the answers as to why they are in uniform, and if the answers they get are worth fighting and dying for. That, he said to Capra, is your job. To win this war, we must win the battle for men's minds. I think films are the answer, and that you are the answer to such films. He wanted Capra to make a series of documented, factual information films, the first in our history, that will explain to our boys in the Army why we are fighting and the principles for which we are fighting. Major Capra, who was not known to be a shrinking violet, was humbled before such a task. He said, "General Marshall, it's only fair to tell you that I have never before made a single documentary film. In fact, I've never even been near anybody that's made one." With a slight edge in his voice, the general replied, "Capra, I have never been chief of staff before. Thousands of young Americans have never had their legs shot off before. Boys are commanding ships today who a year ago had never seen the ocean before." "I'm sorry, sir," said Capra. "I'll make you the best damn documentary films ever made." And he did. Capra didn't know how he was going to go about making these documentaries, but a favorite passage from the Bible recurred to him. "Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." He wondered whether the truth could also make you strong. He thought the truth about the World War going on right then was that the Nazis of Germany, the warlords of Japan, and the fascists of Italy were out to deliberately take over the free nations by force so they could stamp out human freedom and establish their own world's dictatorships. If they knew that truth, he thought, free men everywhere would fight to the death against it. The most effective way to show men that truth, Capra thought, was to show them vividly what the enemy himself said and did. That became the key idea of his documentaries. He set about collecting all German, Japanese, and Italian film reels of the past 20 years and most of their propaganda films made before and during the war. He would let the enemy prove to our soldiers the enormity of their cause and the justness of ours. Over the next 2 years, Capra's crews would produce 7 50-minute training films in a series called Why We Fight. They were made by the Army, but they were used by the Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard, and by British, Canadian, Australian, and New Zealand armed forces. They were translated into French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Chinese, and shown to Allied armed forces in China, South America, and parts of Europe and Africa. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill ordered that all 7 films be shown to the British public in theaters. The episode called Battle of Russia was shown throughout the Soviet Union. They continued to be shown in theaters by the State Department in occupied countries after the war. President Roosevelt saw the first film in the series in a private viewing at the White House with Capra present. When it was over, the President said, "Every man, woman, and child in the world must see this film." It won an Oscar for Best Documentary in 1942. In 1944, the entire series won the New York Film Critics Award for Best Documentaries. But the greatest honor came from Winston Churchill. In September 1943, Major Capra received a heart-stopping invitation to meet Churchill in his office at 10 Downing Street in London. There, the great man volunteered to be filmed introducing the series to the British public. In that introduction, Churchill proclaimed, "I have never seen or read any more powerful statement of our cause." Being warmly greeted by Churchill and so honored by him was the crowning moment of Frank Capra's life. He was now standing shoulder to shoulder with the man whose speeches had almost single-handedly rallied the free world in its fight against Hitler, and would forever tell free men, whenever tyranny threatens, why we fight. Thanks for being part of the American Story. This is Chris Flannery with the Claremont Institute. If you'd like to learn more about these stories or how you might support them, please visit our website at www.theamericanstorypodcast.org. That's theamericanstorypodcast.org.